on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the hard knock life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the N.O.C. In full color, you see me. The hard knock life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.
Welcome to whatever episode this is, of Hard NOC Life. I'm your host, Keith Chow. I have a really special show. I've been away for a while, I know, and I'm kind of getting back into things. I want to thank first Jason Sperber for hosting a couple weeks back. He did a great job, and we took Halloween off, but now we're back, and we're better than ever, and I have a great show lined up for you tonight. In fact, we're going to do things a little bit differently and bring on a special guest for the first half of the show before we dive into our regularly scheduled panel and talk about the topic of the week. But that special guest is a great person. He's a friend of mine. He's all over the news in the last few weeks because he's probably one of the most prestigious graphic novelists that's working in the business today. He's none other than my friend Gene Luen Yang. You may know him from his work on American Born Chinese and Boxers and Saints, both National Book Award nominated graphic novels. So without further ado, I want to welcome Gene Yang to Hard NOC Life. Hey.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me here.
I'm excited to have you here because you have done a lot of really great work and it's being appreciated by a lot of people. First of all, I want to congratulate you on Boxers and Saints and the success with that, and 2 NBAs. Come on, you're like LeBron James.
I'm almost as tall too.
You are very tall. I've never seen Gene in person. He's like 7'2".
No, it's been crazy. It's been nuts. The reception for Boxers and Saints has been unexpected. Yeah, it's really been crazy.
And you've been on a bit of a whirlwind.
You hide out in your drawing room, for Boxers and Saints took me 6 years, and all the way you're struggling with self-doubt and all this stuff, and then you throw it out in the world, and it's just been life has been really crazy in a really good way.
And I mean, you and I were talking a little bit earlier that you've been in a bit of a whirlwind for the last few months. It's nice to kind of be settled for a little bit, but you're going to go back out on the road in a little bit too, right?
Yeah. My publisher has been great. Most of my comics now are published by First Second Books, which is based out of New York, and they've really gotten behind Boxers and Saints. So they sent me out on a book tour, and this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. So it started in September, right after the book was released. And in September, I was gone for 2 weeks straight. And then after that, I've had about an event a week. So I'll fly out every weekend. Next week, I'll be in Los Angeles doing a program with the Los Angeles Public Library. And then after that, I'll be in New York and Boston and Miami.
That's crazy. And then you were just like all over the East Coast a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah. It's really because First Second has gotten behind the books. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, more than just Boxers and Saints. I mean, I know that you said you've been working on that book for 6 years. I mean, before that, American Born Chinese, of course, blew up and was another National Book Award nominee. And then, but you had some really fantastic books in between. I mean, Level Up and one of my personal favorites is a collaboration with both of our mutual friend Derek Kirk Kim, The Eternal Smile. I mean, you're making us look bad, Gene. Is what I'm saying.
No, Derek, I loved working on Eternal Smile with that. So that was a collection of 3 short stories that I did with Derek. I did all the writing and he did all the art, and it was awesome because I would just send these scripts and they would come back beautifully illustrated, and without me having to sweat over a drawing table. Derek actually has another book coming out soon too, in just in a couple weeks.
Right? Tune,
second
right?
volume of Tune coming out. Yeah, Tune is this. It's a series that he's been doing. It's kind of like a cross between a science fiction epic and a rom-com. It's really cool.
Yeah, I miss Derek Kirk Kim as a cartoonist. So
yeah, he's slow. He's awesome, but he's slow.
So again, thank you for being on Hard NOC Life. We've been wanting to have you on for a while, and I just wanted to kind of delve into a little bit about your success, and the books that you've written, specifically, Boxers and Saints and American Born Chinese. Some people may not know you continue to be a teacher, right? You are still a classroom teacher.
Yeah, I used to be a full-time high school teacher, and then after American Born Chinese, I went part-time, and now I'm part-time at the school, but I mostly do database work for them. I teach through Hamlin University now. Hamlin University is based in Minnesota, and they have this MFA in creative writing for children and young adults. It's a low-res program, which means that the faculty and the students all get together twice a year for about a week, and then most of the work is done online. So that's where most of my teaching happens now. It's been awesome. It's been great to be a part of that faculty. I feel like I've really learned a lot from hanging out with all these award-winning, in different genres. One of the guys on staff is Gary Schmidt, who is a Newbery honor winner, and then Ann Ursu also made the long list for the National Book Award this year. So there are these amazing authors working in all these different genres, all hanging out together. Was awesome.
Right. Well, and I bring that up because and it's kind of good to know that you now have more space, I guess, to write and draw. And I mean, it was kind of hard. What I wanted to ask you is, like, when you were before American Born Chinese, when you were a full-time teacher, and you'd already put out a couple comic books and graphic novels prior to American Born Chinese, like Gordon Yamamoto and Loyola Chin.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, awesome.
Yeah, I'm an old school Gene Yang. I go back a long time. I also used to work for Diamond Book Distributors. So
that's right. Right. You do it all.
No, but so, like, I was going to ask you, like, how difficult was it? So when you were writing your magnum opus, when you were writing American Born Chinese, how difficult was it to juggle being a full-time teacher and creating an American masterwork? Humble brag. You can humble brag all you want.
I will say this. I will say that comics will eat your life, dude. They will. I mean, comics is just so labor intensive that you kind of have to give up half your friends and all of your TV. So when I was working on American Born Chinese, I was working full time as a classroom teacher, and I would just have to wake up early and go to sleep late to get my pages done. So I would try to wake up maybe at 5:30 in the morning, do an hour or two on my comic, and then before I went to sleep, I would do another hour or two. And then during the summers, I would try to do as much as I could. I tried to do a page or two every day during the summer to get it done. And even then, I mean, American Born Chinese, it just took forever. It took forever to get it done. But I think that's true for any cartoonist.
Yeah, especially when you're juggling. I mean, if you have like a day job and then you have you're doing it all in the off hours, it can be hard. You said it took you 6 years to work on Boxers and Saints. How long did it take ultimately to create American Born Chinese?
It was about 5.
Oh, wow, so the Boxers and Saints actually took you longer.
Yeah, Boxers and Saints took longer. It's a higher page count. I think that's part of it.
It's 2 books too.
Also, it's 2 books. It's over twice as long as American Born Chinese was. I think it's almost 3 times as long as American Born Chinese when you take the 2 books together.
Right.
And then it was my first. It was the first time I went into historical fiction. This was my first historical fiction project, and that was super intimidating, because I'd never really done intensive research like that. And I was just constantly afraid that I would get something wrong and some history nerd would call me on it. And actually, that's kind of happened already. But it was also great. I feel like I really learned a lot about Chinese history. I'm no expert by any means, but I know a lot more than I did before. And I also, I think a lot of my books deal with like the coming together of Eastern and Western culture.
Yeah.
Just because that's what I am.
Well, that kind of is what being an Asian American is about.
Yeah, exactly. It's negotiation, right, between cultures. So I feel like doing that book, the Boxer Rebellion really is the first global conflict that involved both Eastern and Western nations. So just by looking at that, looking at the dynamics that were at play, I really feel like I learned a lot, both about Chinese history and also about my own place, in the world.
Right, and I think what's interesting. This kind of leads me to like my next question, and I don't know if you had a chance to read it, and anyone who's been reading Nerds of Color this week, Raymond, who's one of our fellow nerds and happens to be my brother, he wrote a post a couple days ago, maybe yesterday, 2 days ago or so, where he kind of talked about how he has difficulty reconciling different interpretations of the characters he loves, and he specifically talks about Christopher Nolan's Batman, but also talks about your Monkey King.
Yeah. No, I saw it, dude. Your brother's a smart guy. Your brother. I think you know, he quoted it too. Like I had this talk with Eric as I was working on American Born Chinese about it, and the thing your brother brought up was that in my version of the Monkey King, I combined stories. You know, I combined the Monkey King story with stories of the West, with stories from the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Right.
And really the reason why I did that was, well, first, you know, when I started doing comics as an adult, the first thing I wanted to do was to do a straight adaptation of the Monkey King story, of Journey to the West. And I started researching, and I realized that in Asia, everybody has done their own version of, like, a straight adaptation of Journey to the West, right? I found out that
Dragon Ball Z was essentially a Monkey King story.
Yeah, right? Dragon Ball Z. And Tezuka, Osamu Tezuka, creator of Astro Boy,
right.
You know, in Japan, they call him the god of manga, the god of comics. So when I found out the god of comics has done his version of the Monkey King, I just thought, man, what am I doing? What can I possibly add to the world by doing my own? So in the end, I just felt like I hit on this idea of using the Monkey King to talk about my experience as an Asian American. And because my version of the Monkey King really, like, it had to be like an Asian American version, and I really wanted it to be like a mythological foundation for everything else that happens in the book. I knew I had to combine Eastern and Western stories, you know. So that was the thought. But at the same time, I feel them, right? I think if, like, my version of the Monkey King for some unforeseen reason became the most well-known version, I think I'd be sad about it. I would really hope that like the original, like, when I talk to students about American Born Chinese, I always encourage them to go and read
Seek out
West. I mean, Journey to the West is amazing. There's a reason why it's a classic.
Well, you know, and I think, and I don't want to speak for Raymond. He couldn't bother to be on the show tonight, but
yeah, good job, Raymond.
Yeah, I know, right? How are you going to bring it up and, like, bail out on him? He's got some interesting things to say about Avatar that Julie mentioned before the show started. But anyway, I may, you know, be his proxy for that too.
Okay.
I think that's one of his concerns. He didn't necessarily say it in his post, but, like, the reason he uses Batman and Christopher Nolan's Batman as the kind of the other example is that, you know, and again, I don't want to speak for him, but I think his fear is that people will associate Christopher Nolan Batman henceforth and forever until Ben Affleck shows up.
Yeah.
with Batman, and I think that's his. You know, he may not have said it in the post, but I think that's also part of the fear is that, like you said, if he as a Buddhist, a Chinese Buddhist, you know, and his tie to Monkey King.
Yeah, I can see that. I think, you know, at the same time, though, the Monkey King is a pretty flexible character. I think even in Asia, if you look at Asian Monkey King comics, I mean, there are, like, sci-fi versions of him, there are, you know, zombie versions of him. Jason Shika, who he is? You know who he is.
Yeah, Jason Shika,
yeah. He went to Japan and he bought me the zombie Monkey King book. It was kind of crazy.
That's Japan.
You know, brains and stuff. So
Japan has everything.
Different, you know, components, and even the you know, the version of the Monkey King that I have, where I combine Christian elements into it. I have seen Christian versions of the Monkey King as well, you know, on Taiwanese television. So
well, and I think that's the other important aspect about American Born Chinese, and even Boxers and Saints, to kind of tie it into the other NBA nominated graphic novel, Gene Yang, I mean, you are a Roman Catholic Asian American, and that is your experience, and tying, you know, and talking about the Boxers and Saints. I mean, one of the things that, for people who are not familiar with Chinese history, the Boxer Rebellion is essentially a rebellion of Chinese against Western imperialism, Western missionaries, and so that's what Boxers and Saints talks about too. So I think as a Christian, as an Asian American Christian, I think that's that's what you were writing about in your books, right?
Yeah. Especially Boxers and Saints. I think the way I got interested in the Boxer Rebellion in the first place is I grew up in this Chinese American Catholic community, and when I was growing up, anytime people were talking about Jesus and God, they were doing it in Chinese. So they kind of seemed like this Western faith and this Eastern culture kind of seemed like they would go hand in hand. A lot of the Chinese culture that I experienced as a kid, I experienced through that church. Like, for instance, there's a Catholic celebration called All Souls Day, right? And the way my church celebrated All Souls Day was basically the way Chinese people have been honoring their ancestors for centuries and centuries and centuries, even before Catholicism made its way over to China. So as a kid, I always thought they kind of went hand in hand. But then, as an adult, I began to realize that there are actually some pretty stark differences. And historically, this has been like Eastern culture and Western faith have really clashed, And the Boxer Rebellion is like a prime example of that. So in the year 2000, Pope John Paul II canonized a group of Chinese Catholic saints, and this is the first time that this deeply Western church had ever honored Chinese citizens in this way. So my home church freaked out about it. They had all these celebrations. They were super happy. But then when I looked into the lives of these saints, I discovered that a lot of them were killed during the Boxer Rebellion. And they were killed because they were seen as traitors to their own culture, right? And in fact, the Chinese government, shortly after the canonization, actually issued this protest saying that the Roman Catholic Church was actually honoring traitors. So that whole dynamic, about, can you actually take these Western and Eastern pieces and put them together into a cohesive identity? That was really important. That was really important to me, just as somebody who grew up the way I did, and that was also really interesting to me, So that's sort of the beginning of Boxers and Saints.
Yeah, and I think again, tying it back to American-born Chinese is just a very specific expression of the Asian American experience too, right? Like, so for someone like myself and Raymond, who didn't grow up in a Christian household, we and I'll stop speaking for Raymond, because again, if you wanted to talk, you should have been on the show. But as for me, like I definitely identified with the Asian American aspect of American-born Chinese, for example, and I think but one of the things about universality is that the more specific you are, the more universal it is. The story ends up being, right? So because you were talking about a very specific experience, to me, I had less issue with. And I think part of it is that I don't have the same attachment to the Monkey King the way Raymond does. I'm not to say that I don't appreciate the story, but I think I was able to kind of remove myself and understand it as your expression of what you grew up with. And myself, who did not grow up necessarily in a Christian household, but saw I was able to relate to the Asian American aspects, like the chinky and feeling feeling as an outcast in your environment. I also love that the two of them are actually people probably forgot about the Yao Ming karaoke Backstreet Boys singers. I'm glad that you were able to canonize them in the back of your book, but. Like all of that. I think that is what I identify with, and I think as a Christian Asian American, you have to talk about your experience, right?
Yeah, I just think that like Christianity is so, like, European culture is so built on Christianity that it's hard to get away from it when you're in Western culture. There are so many things about Western culture that we take for granted that have its roots in some sort of a Judeo-Christian worldview, and the relationship between Christianity and Chinese culture is just really, it's a complex and it's an interesting one. So in the Boxer Rebellion, they were seen as these opposing forces, and then later in America, when the Chinese first came to America, a lot of them were not welcome in local public schools. So Christian missionaries actually went into Chinatowns, mostly Protestant missionaries, went into Chinatowns, and they would establish these schools for young Chinese kids. And eventually, the churches that were established around these schools became these hubs of cultural preservation. So the Chinese would go to these Christian churches, and they wouldn't necessarily go for faith reasons. They would actually go for cultural reasons. And I also thought that was really interesting too, right? This faith, this Western faith, this cultural force that was seen as something that was in opposition to Christian culture actually becomes a way in which Chinese people are able to hang on to their culture.
Mm-hmm. And that's I mean, and you see that a lot in, like you said, if you go certain parts of Asia, if you go to, like, for example, Taiwan has a very large Christian population, and there are a lot of enclaves in America that are Chinese and Christian and can reconcile those, like you said, seemingly opposing cultures, but I mean, because there are a lot of, I mean, the thing sometimes, and as a Chinese Christian, I wonder, like, sometimes the Chineseness is very overpowering, right? Like, do you feel like that there can be
of course, dude. And I don't even know if it's Chineseness. It's like the version of Chinese culture. Like, it all depends on when your parents immigrated, right? So my parents immigrated in the 1970s. They're part of this. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a programmer, right? And most of the parents of my friends were like that. They were able to come to the United States because they were involved in technology, and they had this, like, strong value for education, and sometimes things would, like, I remember, for instance, at my home church, I went on this retreat with my parents when I was a preteen, and the priest at our church gave this talk where he says, you gotta find your own way in the world, and that may not involve college. College is not right for everyone. You should think about it. And I could just see all the parents just freak out, right? They were quiet. They didn't want to contradict the priest, but they totally freaked out. So there are these little moments like that.
Right. So I want to kind of move away from talking about American-born Chinese and Boxing Sanchez and start looking towards the future. And I know that you have another book that is on its way. And I have a little bit of a connection to this book because I feel partly responsible for it. It's a book called Shadow Hero that you're working on with Sonny Liew. Can you talk a little bit about Shadow Hero and why I feel like I have a stake in that book?
Yeah, well, so Sonny Liew is this amazing artist based out of Singapore. He's done a lot of work for Marvel. He did a lot of those. He did the Sense and Sensibility adaptation for Marvel, which is gorgeous, right? And he did a book called Wonderland for Disney Press and SLG Publishing. That's a continuation of Alice in Wonderland. He's a brilliant artist. The thing I most appreciate about Sonny's work is that he's able to combine the dramatic with the comedic, and that's one of the people I really wanted to work with.
And also, when was the first time you worked with Sonny Liew?
That's what I was going to get to. The first time I worked with Sonny, really, Sonny and I owe our careers to Secret Identities, which is this anthology of Asian American superhero comics that both of us were involved in a few years ago, and it was edited by Keith, actually.
Me? No, well, not just me. Jeff Yang and Perry Shin and Jeremiah had a little bit to do with it too.
So you guys actually matched me up with Sonny, and I'd always wanted to work with him, but really Secret Identities gave me the opportunity to do it, and together we created a short story that was kind of a riff on Green Hornet and Kato. And that was awesome. Working with him, working with you guys was a lot of fun. So after that, I actually started working on the script that became the Shadow Hero. I sent it in to 4 Second Books, and they really liked it, so they signed it. And they asked me who I wanted to work with. And because I had that awesome experience working with Sonny on Secret Identities, I asked for him, and they already had a working relationship with Sonny, so it was easy to get him on board. And then while we were working on that book, actually, you guys did Shattered. Mm-hmm. So we did a short story in Shattered that stars the same character that we're using in the Shadow Hero.
Right, and what I think is fascinating about the Shadow Hero, and one of the reasons we used it in Shattered, is that your approach to him is, and then we'll probably have to give some background to the viewers out there, but your approach to him is that he is the first Asian American superhero in American comics. And can you talk a little bit about how true that is, and how you came across that story and why you decided to? And I guess, was he in the public domain? Is that how you were able to?
Yeah, he's in the public domain. So the Shadow Hero is actually a revival of this superhero, this American superhero from the 1940s called the Green Turtle. And I first found out about the Green Turtle through a blog, through I think it's called Pappy's Golden Age blog. So on this blog, they feature these obscure Golden Age heroes. Every week or so they would put a new one up. So Derek Kirk Kim, my friend, who most of the good things in my life are Kirk Kim.
You owe to Derek.
He was the one that sent me the link, right? He goes, check this guy out. And I saw it and I just thought, man, this is nuts. So the Green Turtle was created by this guy named Chu Hing. He's a Chinese American, and he was one of the first Asian Americans to be working in the American comic book industry. And here's the rumor about the Green Turtle. The rumor is that Chu Hing wanted him to be a Chinese American hero, like a Chinese American World War II hero, fighting on the side of the Allies, right? And his publishers just didn't think that would fly. Mm-hmm. So
this was the 1940s. So.
Yeah. So they might have had a point. So Chu Hing rebels in this really passive-aggressive way. Like if you look at these early Green Turtle comics, you never see his face. Almost never. You almost never see his face, right? He almost always has his back turned towards you. So all you see is the Green Turtle's cape. And then whenever he is turned towards you, something is blocking his face. Like it's either like his arm because he's punching somebody, or it's a shadow or something, right? And the rumor is that Chu Hing did this because he wanted to be able to imagine his hero as he had originally intended, as a Chinese American. So the Green Turtle was not popular. He ended up getting canceled after just 5 issues. And we never find out we never find out his secret identity or secret origin or anything about him. So it's never confirmed whether he actually is a Chinese American hero or not. And that's what Sonny and I are doing. We made up an origin story for him. And we're establishing him as like the first Asian American superhero. I actually have proofs here. Let me pull them up.
Oh, cool. So did you ever like track down those original 5 issues?
I did. Yeah, I did it on eBay, and I did it on at Comic Cons and stuff. Wow. And I ended up having to. It was really sad. I ended up having to take one apart. I took out all the staples of my copy of Blazing Comics #1, right, which had the very first Green Turtle story, so that I could scan it,
right,
so that I could include it in the Shadow Hero. So here's what the proofs look like. That's the.
Oh, is this a Nerds of Color exclusive?
Yeah, I guess it is.
Not really. Well, I guess that the cover is, and the cover's been out for a while, but.
Yeah, the cover's been out, but this is the first time I've shown the proofs. And then here's some of the pages. You can see.
Whoa,
Sonny's art is just amazing. He's just awesome. Yeah.
And those of you who have not purchased Shattered, the second book in Secret Identities, you and Sonny created a series of like newspaper comic strips.
Yeah.
Shadow Hero stories in the kind of the look and feel of a newspaper comic strip, and you tell like a little short story about the Green Turtle and his mom, I think, right?
Yeah. Like our book is really about. What I really want to talk about is the immigrant experience. It's like becoming what it means to become an American. Because superheroes at the root are a really, really American genre, right? Yeah. It was born in America. It expresses what it means to be an American, what Americans think of ourselves. And it really, it didn't take the same kind of hold in any other country that it did in America. It's just deeply, deeply American. So I just thought using the superhero genre to talk about the immigrant experience would be something interesting to do. So his mom and his dad, who are the immigrants, to the United States, play prominent roles in the story.
So when does Shadow Hero come out? It's sometime next year.
Yeah, it'll be out in time for Comic-Con. It'll debut in the summer of 2014.
Very cool, and we are all looking forward to it. Before we wrap up this particular portion and bring in the rest of the panel, I know that the other thing that you are well known for, other than making fantastic books, is your involvement in the Avatar universe. I know that you were one of the first, I guess, celebrity endorsers of race bending, I think, as far as when The Last Airbender came out, and you were one of the more prominent voices about your displeasure with casting white actors in the roles of Aang and others. How did you come to be a part of the actual creative process of the Avatar universe?
Well, like I said before, most of the good things in my life start with Derek. So it totally started with Derek.
I hope Derek's watching. If he's not watching, I'll be so sad.
Yeah, Derek actually, he was the one that introduced me to Avatar: Last Airbender. So I was a high school teacher at the time, right? And I would hear my students talk about this. They'd go, "Oh, who do you think Katara's going to end up with?" Or "Who do you think is going to be Aang's earthbending teacher?" Like they talk about this while they're supposed to be working on their projects. And I'd always be intrigued, but I was the teacher, so I have to go shut up and get back to work. Right, and then Derek approaches me a year later with these DVDs, and he goes, "Dude, this is like the best American-produced cartoon series ever. You gotta check it out." And I was like, "Really?" It was on Nickelodeon. How good could it be? and then I watched it, and it was amazing. It was awesome. I thought like the subtlety of the writing is it's amazing that they were able to pull that off on cable TV. I was stunned by what they were able to do. So I became this huge fan. And then when they announced that they were going to make this live action movie, I was super excited about it. And then they announced that M. Night Shyamalan was going to direct it, and I was less excited about it. I was like, well, I liked his first 3 movies. Maybe this will be his comeback. And then they announced the casting, and I was just like, the casting just I just thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was like this was the one big movie in a long time where Asian American actors, I thought, had an advantage, right? Mm-hmm. Had this huge advantage to getting those roles, and it was just it was ridiculous. So Derek and I both ended up asking people to boycott. He did this long post on his blog about it, and I ended up doing this webcomic about why I was never going to go see that movie. And to this day, I haven't seen it. But I've heard that the casting is the least of its problems. In any case, one of the people who read that webcomic was an editor at Dark Horse. So she had also read American-Born Chinese and a few of my other comics. So when Dark Horse acquired the license to do Avatar: Last Airbender comics, she called me up and she asked me if I'd be willing to write it for them. And that's how I got the job. I got the job by complaining about the movie. Pro tip for all of you wannabe comic artists out there: just bitch and moan on the internet long enough, and an editor will call you up. Right? That's right. That's the advice. It's better than a resume. Bitching and moaning on the internet is better.
So as we transition into our Avatar: The Last Airbender discussion, I want to bring in the rest of the nerds of color, specifically the 2 nerds of color who are our resident Avatar geeks. They do the recaps, or the N.O.C caps, or the N.O.C caps. I don't know how to pronounce it, but they recap The Legend of Korra for us on a weekly basis. So we first introduce someone that you viewers of the Hard NOC Life are familiar with. She is a frequent guest on our show, and you can find her on Twitter at Julie Kang. It's Julie Kang. Hey, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. I've been loving your discussion so far.
Well, and now we're about to head into your part of the discussion. So thanks for being patient with Gene and I, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Our other panelist is our other resident Avatar Korra geek. He is a frequent poster. He does the other half of our Nerds of Color Korra recaps. He is also a spoken word artist based out of the Twin Cities. You can find him on Twitter at, I'm going to have to read your Twitter handle, RSC Spoken Word. It is Rodrigo Sanchez-Chavarria.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Great job.
Hi, Rodrigo.
Hi, how are you, Gene?
Not bad, not bad. Thanks for inviting me on the show, man. This is
a lot of fun. I've heard a lot of things, and so I'm really happy that this is happening. By the way, Hamlin is one of the universities I want to apply for grad school for my MFA, so good to hear good things about it. So.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been awesome. I feel like I've learned so much by being a part of that community.
So as we get into our Avatar discussion, I did want to introduce one more aspect of the show tonight, and that is Gene has a couple free comic book day Avatar comics that he's itching to give away.
Yeah, there's just enough room in my house.
So what we have decided to do is he has 3 comics to give away, and we want to give them away for him. So what we're going to do is have you follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, and like us on Facebook. And if we can get 550 likes on Facebook by Monday, and 500 follows on Twitter by Monday, and 150 subscriptions on YouTube by Monday, we will send a comic to each of our followers, likers, and subscribers randomly sometime next week. So does that sound like a plan?
Awesome.
Sounds
Are we
good.
with that?
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
so tell your Twitter friends and your Facebook friends and your YouTube friends to find the Nerds of Color. We're at the Nerds of Color on Twitter, Facebook.com/the Nerds of Color, YouTube.com/the Nerds of Color. Like us, follow us, subscribe to us, and we'll give you some Avatar comments. So with that, we want to kind of talk about, continue our conversation with Gene, talking about the Avatar universe. I know I want to bring Rodrigo and Julian because they are aficionados on the Avatar universe. I myself is not as much of a connoisseur as you guys are, but I will try to facilitate as much as possible. So as we continue, I know that Gene, your comics kind of bridge Avatar and Korra.
Yeah.
Do you follow? I'm assuming you're a fan of The Legend of Korra as well.
Yeah. I've been watching The Legend of Korra. Yeah.
How much advanced information are you given, or are you given any?
Yeah, they give me bits and pieces. So, for instance, I knew before the second season started that it was going to be about spirits, right? I knew that the spirit world was going to factor in. So, but they don't give me everything. They just give me bits and pieces that I can write to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Julie and Rodrigo, as our resident Korra freaks.
We're name calling, aren't we?
I'm trying to think of other adjectives. So what brought the both of you to like the? I mean, Gene talked about it was his student. So how about the both of you? How did you come to appreciate Avatar? Well, let's start with Rodrigo since you're the new kid on the block.
I'm the new kid on the block. Well, I've always been a cartoon-based person ever since I was little, and I've grown up in Peru, growing up watching Saint Seiya, Robotech, Astro Boy, Messenger Z, Ultraman, all these things. And so when we moved to the United States, I always wanted to find an outlet to figure out some of the same things that I've enjoyed. And so it wasn't until my kids got older that they started getting into TV and cartoon shows and all the other stuff. And we had just finished getting into Justice League, and we were watching stuff on Nickelodeon. And I always check out new shows just to see what they're like. So I started checking out the show called Avatar, and then I was like, this is pretty decent. So then usually me and the kids nerd out, so we just go sit in front of the TV and we started watching it. Next thing you know, my wife is wondering while we're all watching TV and taking over her TV time. So she sits down and she starts joining in, and eventually it took them about 3 or 4 episodes to finally totally get into it, and it became like a family tradition every time that we could all get together to kind of sit down and watch Avatar. I mean, the storytelling was great. The fact that my kids could identify with the characters, not only based on what's going on, but also on how they look like, and that's a lot of the things that I think my kids like about that, is that they can say, hey, I know someone that looks like that, or I can identify with that. I think that's important, and so that's one of the things that they enjoy, and we do. And I mean, storytelling was great. The story was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can't stop watching. We watched all 3 books of Avatar probably about 15 times, because we get bored. We get start watching. There's nothing good on TV. Just pop in a DVD, go ahead and start watching season 1, season 2, book 2, book 3. We have our favorites, we have our things. So it's just nice to be able to share those kind of nerdy things with the family. So. Yeah,
Rodrigo coined the term "N.O.C" in training that we like to use on the website. Julie,
I coined N.O.C. in training.
Well,
you guys changed that to N.O.C. in training.
So, Julie, do you have a similar kind of Avatar origin story too?
Unfortunately, I wasn't there from the very beginning. I think I got in right around when my daughter was born, which is early 2007. So we had a couple seasons to catch up on, kind of binge watch, while there's always a period in like a child's infancy when you have a lot of downtime and nothing better to do. So we binge watched the first couple seasons. My son at the time was 3.5, and so he just caught onto it like latched onto it like a pacifier. I mean, it was crazy. And then when we just kind of watched it casually, and then when the whole race bending thing came on, I decided to watch it all over again, each episode multiple times to really confirm that, wow, like this is an Asian American, or sorry, Asian world, and there's really just no ethical reason or artistic reason at all to make the casting decisions that they did. And so I started paying kind of a more critical eye on it, and have kept tabs on it since this new incarnation of this new avatar. And yeah.
And then Nerds of Color comes along, and now you both have an outlet to write about your obsession with the show.
Exactly. I have an official reason to totally geek out every Friday.
A healthy reason to geek out every Friday. So yeah.
And so Gene, as a kind of, you're a fan of the show, but you're also kind of, you're part of it too, right? I mean, you create things, and I'm assuming the comics are canon, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah. I feel incredibly lucky. It's a tiny little corner of this giant world that I'm a part of, but I really feel lucky to be a part of this corner. It's an amazing thing. I think Avatar has grown so that it's not just the show anymore. It's kind of like a culture, and maybe even a cult. It's been great. It's been I feel like I've gotten to work pretty closely with Mike and Brian, the creators of the show, Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. I was just name dropping right there. And I feel like I've learned a lot about storytelling from them. The pacing of writing for a television show is different from the pacing of writing for just a graphic novel. And for the comics, we really want to imitate the pacing of the show. So I feel like I've learned a lot.
The new issue that came out, the conclusion of the search, there's obviously some really kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge tag teaming going on between what's going on with the current season of Korra and then what's going on in this, I guess, history version of the canon. And so that has to be purposeful, right? Like you had to kind of wait for this one to come out for you to kind of allude to a Spirit Forest, and right when they were showing Spirit Forest stuff in their flashback episodes.
Well, they, like I said before, they give me bits and pieces, right? They'll tell me bits and pieces of about the upcoming season, and all the spirity stuff that's in the book. I guess it's kind of purposeful. I mean, it's more. I set out to write a book, and then I set out to write a story, right? And I try to make it as compelling as possible. And that story itself is based on these bones that the Avatar team has already laid out. And then there are going to be certain places where, in our discussions, it comes out, this would be a great place to connect, right? So we don't start off with the connections. We start off with trying to tell a good story. And then as we're building the story, little parts will come out where it goes, oh, you could probably connect something here, or you can connect something here. So
That's
it's more
amazing.
of it's more of like I guess it's more like an organic thing. We like to think of it as an organic thing.
And so in this specific storyline with the search for Zuko's mom and the fate of Zuko's mom, Prince Zuko, was the kind of main outline given to you to flesh out, or did you come up with the legend behind it?
Well, they, the Zuko's mom storyline originally, Mike and Brian wanted to resolve that in a TV special, like a movie on Nickelodeon, and they got shot down, right? So what they gave me to start this book was the proposal that they had sent out to Nickelodeon. Well, they got shot down, but they got shot down in favor of Korra. So you can't complain.
Okay.
Right. So I started with that proposal, and there I would say, like I said before, like pieces of it were there, but I definitely also felt like they gave me quite a bit of creative elbow room, to work in. It definitely is a collaborative process. I really feel like, I get feedback from either Mike or Brian or both on every draft that I do, from the outline all the way to the script. And I also get feedback from a bunch of different editors at both Dark Horse and Nickelodeon.
But you also have free reign to kind of I guess you don't have too much free reign because there are things that are happening in Korra that you can't contradict, but you have enough free reign where you can create.
Yeah, I can throw stuff out there, and I don't feel like there's anything that I couldn't throw out there. I could throw stuff out there, and then there are certain things that they go, that doesn't totally fit, and we'll take it out. But But it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun to work.
But you still, you get to play in the universe, so that's always.
Yeah, you get to play in the universe.
It is
Rodrigo.
such the dream job.
Yeah,
Rodrigo,
it's crazy. It's kind of crazy.
Rodrigo, do you have a question? I know that you kind of were complaining that I took your question, so I hope you have another one.
You gotta put me on blast. Okay, that's cool. No, I mostly one of my questions is just overall is out of all the worlds that you get to be in the aspect of when you're writing these graphic novels for the Avatar, what do you have like a preference or a favorite? We have Fire Nation, Earth, Water.
Yeah, you know what, I like one of the things that really interested me in the beginning is how these different cultures come together. I guess that's the theme that I like to play with in my own work too. Is when cultures come together, how do they interact? And that's something that we were able to explore in the first trilogy of graphic novels in The Promise. So for The Promise, what we looked at was, the Fire Nation is really loosely based on Meiji Restoration Japan. It's based on like Japan from maybe the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s. So after the Fire Nation gets defeated, we talked about where we would take the story from there. So we had to look at what happened to Japan after Japan was defeated. Right. After World War II, right? And we saw, they were forced to pull out of, they were forced to pull these colonies out of all these different nations, places like Taiwan, and Korea, and we talked about how that's, for normal people, for normal Japanese people, non-military people, that could have been a really traumatic experience. Because a lot of them had been living there for a long time. So being able to do that, being able to find connections between these fantasy worlds and in the real world, I think that's one of the most gratifying parts of working in Avatar.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things too, in that kind of work, is to be able to connect the fantasy world, like you said, with the aspect of history and reality. So, because that's one of the things that I love it, is that I can see that. I mean, I've seen that. What happens on not only in the show or what happens on in the graphic novels. I was like, yeah, I can see that. I've experienced that. I've seen that, and I think that's one of the things that it really draws to me, because it can say it speaks to me in the essence of, like, I was like, yeah, I can totally identify this. I can claim this as mine. It's basically when it comes to the water tribe aspect of it. I think that's probably something that I can probably relate to more. And of course, as my kids, they always like to be waterbenders in the pool every time they're trying to. The dance and all the other stuff, and doing all that, and so it's really interesting to see how that also teaches them about not only certain things, but about the elements and the aspects, and so, like, I mean, it's amazing watching them process everything that goes on in the show, and then now soon the graphic novels, because now my kids are old enough to start getting into comic books. So my oldest, I think last year, after she got totally into the Avengers, she ended up wanting to pick up Black Widow comic book, and so that's what she's into right now.
Cool.
And so then now she's into graphic novels. She's trying to get into this after Daddy gets done reading and finish them all. She's gonna take them over, and so is my youngest, my middle child, my 6-year-old. So they're all totally into everything. But it's amazing how they process that, and how as kids or as N.O.Cs in training, they associate that aspect of, they can see themselves on the TV screen, which is something that you don't see very much. And as I addressed in a poem recently, is just the fact that we need to see representation not only on TV screen but on LCD screens as well too, and video games and all those different things. We don't see that. I think that's why, to me, the series is important in that aspect to me. So.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really appreciate about the series is how it blends these Eastern and Western elements. Like each of the cultures is based on a real world Eastern culture, but at the same time, like just the whole world is actually organized around these, like the 4 elements that it's organized around are Western elements, right? They're not the 5 traditional Eastern elements.
Mm-hmm.
So from the beginning, from the design of the world, it's this blend. It's this blend of cultures. It's a coming together of cultures. And then the show itself is about that too. It's about the coming together of cultures. What happens when, when a balance is thrown out between these two
Exactly. Yeah.
cultures.
And so I wanted to actually throw something out there, as far as like a critique of Avatar and its universe, and I think Julie knows where I might go with this. This is from someone who's we won't name. He's not here. But you can take a guess. But his particular critique of the show, and I will say this, he says this as a fan of the show, and someone who enjoys the show. Do you feel like that a critique of the show, this is a valid critique of the show, that it is kind of, because like what you just said, that it's this blend of West and East, but do you think it can be conceived as, Orientalist in a way? Because like you mentioned, the creators of the show, for those who may not be familiar, the creators of the show are 2 Americans, white Americans.
Yeah.
And so his particular critique is, and I don't want to, I don't want to delve into too much because I don't speak for him, but the essence of the critique is that it is in essence an Orientalist fantasy world that how do you divorce, because it's based on real world Asian cultures, but it's also a fantasy world. How do you reconcile that? I mean, I guess the parallel would be like if you look at George R.R. Martin or J.R.R. Tolkien or other, hyphenate or acronymed authors who write about Middle Earth and, Westeros. They're clearly Western, European ancient cultures. This is the Avatar is kind of that, but for Eastern cultures. But like you said, there's also a very Westernized element to it. Like so his point is like when they're doing, wushu, they're still doing wushu, but it's not wushu, right? It's like how does that, and then they're clearly like wearing Buddhist robes, even though they're not really Buddhists. They're still Chinese calligraphy, even though they're not really China. Like how does that reconcile itself? Like how does it not reveal itself as just kind of like Orientalist fantasy land?
I think I think the Tolkien comparison is pretty apt, right? Tolkien, when he started on The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, he talked about how he wanted to create a myth for England. So really, at their root, even though England itself is never in The Hobbit is like a fantastical version of England, and I really think that that Avatar is the same way for Asian cultures, and I could see that, like I said, even about the other critiques that this nameless person has given, I could see where he's coming from, but at the same time, I do think that that the difference is the level of research, right? So even though the creators of the show are not Asian or Asian Americans, they do have a lot of Asian folks working at high levels in their staff. One of the lead character designers is Asian. They actually work with a lot of Korean animation studios to produce the shows, and they encourage a much higher level of participation between the Nickelodeon and these Korean studios than is typical of their industry. So I do think there's a level of respect and there's a level of research that happens that for me at least makes it feel more comfortable.
I mean, it's definitely it's a critique that you don't really hear a lot. I mean, because a majority, I feel like it just, if you go out in the geekosphere, the majority of the fan base of Avatar tends to be Asian American. I mean, there are, Dante Bosco is Steve Young, like the voice talent that's behind a lot of the fan loved characters, and again, it's got a very huge Asian American fan base too. So it's an interesting critique to come from that perspective, that because it has such an Asian fan base and Asian kind of cred, to hear that kind of critique is very interesting, I feel. I mean, again, I'm not as familiar of the ins and outs to kind of speak one way or the other of that, but I mean, my in, like you, was with the movie, and I haven't seen the movie either, but the controversy around the movie and the
what
idea.
drew you into that?
What drew me into like just into the sphere and,
Yeah.
and understanding that like yeah, this is, you know, I think I was at a New York Comic Con on a panel and I mentioned like, you know, casting white people as the main characters in Avatar is like casting non-whites in Lord of the Rings. Like how would people respond if Aragorn were African American? I mean, they clearly don't like it. I'm wearing a Thor T-shirt because the movie's coming out, and the internet lost its mind when Idris Elba was cast as Heimdall.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, I think that you know, race bending. I think that the critique is kind of born out of it, because you asked earlier how can you race bend Avatar, but I think the critique is like, well, if you divorce it from its cultural, you know, significance and just make it like a fantasy land, then you can make anyone anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the Shyamalan's excuse, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know. So just a couple more. There are some questions coming in over the transom that I think some fans want to know. One of them is a question about are there any hints on what the Rift storyline will introduce in any of the comics?
So the Rift is the next 3 books. So the first 3 books were called The Promise, the second 3 are called The Search, and then next year we're having 3 books come out called The Rift. And the focus of that book will be on the relationship between Toph and Aang, and we'll also get into some more of, you know, how Republic City develops into Republic City.
Oh my gosh.
That's what we wanted
Julie
to do.
just freaked out.
Toph is absent in the Search, so we
Right.
wanted
Yep. That's one of the things I was going to ask about too.
in the Rift. Yeah.
You know, Julie and Rodrigo's faces are like my favorite part of this episode. Just as you talk, Gene, I just love watching the reaction shots. And another question coming in over the transom is about just kind of, we haven't really touched on Korra too much, even though Julie and Rodrigo are our resident Korra experts. And the questioner asks about the spirituality of this particular season. And let me read the question. He says he feels that of any Avatar series, rather Aang or Korra, he feels like the last few episodes especially has been very staunchly spiritual, and he thinks it's interesting that a cartoon, essentially like a Nickelodeon cartoon, like as dismissive as that may seem, would kind of, that's marketed towards teenagers and tweens, would really delve into spirituality this way. And it's kind of, I like that question because it kind of ties into what you and I Gene, were talking about previously with American-born Chinese and Boxers and Saints. So I want to open that question up to the panel. And we'll probably end on this, but like, how do you feel as far as like, I mean, the season is called Spirits, so do you feel like that kind of focus on spirituality is unique for a show that's, you know, for all intents and purposes for kids? Why don't you take that, Julie?
In my humble opinion, I think Korra's spiritual journey and also the spiritual journey of the overall franchise with the backstory is what's saving the season from kind of being a little too cheesy for watching over and over or actually gaining anything from it. I think it's a common conflict when you're at that kind of adolescent age level of sometimes your intellectual ability or your physical athletic ability far outweighs your emotional growth, and how you can get away with it for a really long time, at least in teenager time. But eventually it'll catch up to you, and it's a part of you that you can't ignore, and you have to nurture and practice and grow, just like, you know, if you're a swimmer, you have to swim lap after lap after lap to get better. And that is, I think personally, is the most compelling thing about this season so far and what keeps me coming back.
Rodrigo, do you want to add to that?
Personally, you know, I grew up in a very indigenous background in Lima, Peru. My dad's from the mountains up in Ayacucho, and my mom's from Bolivia. So in indigenous spirituality has also been something that's been embraced, say, specifically with a you know, just recently with Day of the Dead that passed a couple days ago, and how like we play around with the aspect of spirits always being around, life and death. There needs to be a balance. I mean, it's a daily balance aspect of it. So to me, when you when I see these, in Avatar, and specifically more in Legend of Korra, because in The Last Airbender we were introduced to the aspect of the spirit world, but now more in Korra we're diving more into not only the history but its connections and its effects on what's going on right now. I think it's one of the things that keeps me intrigued for the aspect of, because there needs to be this whole balance thing, and how I've always been perceived that, and how I can teach that to my young kids about it, and how they can also perceive that as well. As I think it's really interesting. I also have my issues with Korra as I also had with The Last Airbender. But one of the things that I really have enjoyed from the series is only being the spirituality, but also having a woman of color as a lead protagonist in this cartoon series. And especially because I have 2 daughters, so they can see themselves on there, and they're like, "Whoa, this is really cool." And so, and the fact that she's very opinionated, strong-minded, and just a typical teenager, or what my girls probably are going to be in the next couple of years. So foreshadowing what I might have to deal with, except for the bending.
You said they're working on it, though, right?
So they're working on that. They're working on that right now. Water bending is the first thing. I do not want to get into fire bending anytime soon. But one of the cool things that I would like to see is just some metal bending overall. But no, in the aspects of the rift, me and Julie have always talked about how Toph's influence on the Legend of Korra has been, not only with Toph's daughter and who is the baby daddy and so what and so what, and so we'll be always coming up with these crazy theories, and also to add on to the aspect of this indigenous belief that I keep on bringing up. One of the things that we talked about when we were doing the 2-episode recap was the lion turtles, and the aspect of its reflection of the indigenous belief of Turtle Island here in the Native in America, and how both of them kind of relay and play with each other, and the aspect that we all live on Turtle Island according to the indigenous beliefs here in the United States and in North America, and how that portrayed not only in Avatar and in The Legend of Korra, and how people live on there, and how the turtles grant them bending powers. So I'm just rambling right now. So.
No, it's fine. It's great. I mean, again, the reason I had you and Julie on is just because of your passion for not just Korra, but the universe itself, and the opportunity to speak with Gene about Avatar and Korra and all the comics in between. So, Gene, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule.
Yes, thank you.
No, thank you for having me. This is
joining us.
Let's do this again. Seriously.
Yeah, let's make this a weekly thing.
Yeah,
after
Gene,
every episode.
Forget.
I'd love to come back at some point. Yeah, I would love to.
So Gene, Boxers and Saints is currently in bookstores now. Shadow Hero comes out first, second next year. Sometime next year. Still don't really have a pub date yet, right?
It's like summer. It'll probably be around the summer of next year.
So summer 2014, look for Shadow Hero. You can find, if you want to read a Shadow Hero story, you can find it in Shattered right now.
That's right.
Bookstores everywhere. So I thank you, Gene. You can find him on Twitter at Gene Luen Yang. I want to thank Rodrigo Sanchez-Chavarria at RSC Spoken Word, and Julie Kang at Julie Kang. Thank you for watching Hard NOC Life. Remember, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and if we hit our benchmarks, we'll send some Avatar comics to you guys. All right? See you next time.
Well, it's the N.O.C. in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard NOC Life, but not the chica kind. More like the people in the world seeking perspectives with a different line. The kids who share their interests together with a similar kind. When they said John Glover for Spider-Man, they didn't mind. The activists, directors, comments, and the lectures. Fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the N.O.C. in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.